Namaste, welcome along. My name is Venu Krishnadas, and thanks for joining us in this session. I'm just going to read a brief introduction about this session. So this is part of a one-day program that's taking place during this COVID-19 lockdown. So we're currently trying to bring some help, bring some awareness to the increase in domestic violence during this lockdown period and the increased for demand of women's refuge and their services they provide. Obviously, a lot of people are stuck at home, and this is going to be creating a lot of strain on relationships and household life. So if you could please visit the Women's Refuge website directly and make a donation to them in this time of need, that would be very much appreciated. So the title of this discussion or exploration is Dharma, Dignity and Divinity. So I want to do just a little breathing meditation to begin. So if you could come to any comfortable seated posture and just sitting up nice and tall. Either sitting in a chair, sitting cross-legged, whatever's comfortable for you. Just bringing some length into the spine, allowing the arms to become heavy and just taking a few deep breaths in and out. And then moving towards having the lips sealed and breathing in and out through the nose. Enjoying each breath. I'm recording this talk out in the nature. And don't try to control or manipulate your breath in any way. We're not striving for any kind of particular outcome. We're just watching our own natural, spontaneous breath. Watch it at the nostril space to begin. Just observing the flow in and out. Relax the jaw, maybe swallow and relax the palate. Relax the tongue, the teeth and the gums. Just giving a quick scan through the body with the awareness, starting in the soles of the feet, top of the feet, ankles, lower legs, knees, upper legs, hips, buttocks. Let go of any gripping or tightness in the space of the groin. Awareness in the lower abdomen. Awareness in the trunk and the navel. Awareness in the heart space, both shoulder blades, both collarbones, the fingers, front of the palms, back of the hands, the wrists, lower arms, elbows, upper arms, armpits, shoulder, throat, back of the neck, jaw, cheeks, tip of the nose, muscles around the eyes. Relax the muscles around the eyes. Relax the temples. Relax the forehead. Relax the crown of the head. Relax all parts of the head. Just come back to watching the breath. And again, we're not trying to control the breath, we're just watching it. And just observe. The more you can absorb your awareness in your own breath, the more the physical body begins to relax, move into a state of ease. And the more we focus on the breath, there's a slowing of mental activity, quieting of the mind. There's nothing else you need to do, nowhere else you need to be in this moment other than watching your own natural breath. The movement in the belly with each breath rising and falling. I'm going to begin with a couple of invocation mantras now. So just stay in your seated posture. Om Jnana-timirandasya Jnanandanan Salakaya Chakshuru Anmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namah. Narayana Parayana Jarahangara Nasan Rupanugametra Prembarojanate Namah. So my very dear respects to you all. Thank you for joining us once again. So let's look into, let's explore together. I don't just want to give dry knowledge, and I really want you to feel into today's topic, how it moves through your own body, how it manifests in your own life. I don't want to just present dry knowledge to kind of file away for a rainy day. So if we begin perhaps with a dictionary definition of dignity, the state or the quality of being worthy of honor or respect. So obviously what's going to be worthy of respect or honor from one person to the next is going to have some variation, and this is often influenced through what's called Samskara, or the impressions that they're already accumulated in the consciousness and the mind. So these impressions, they are of three types, like a line on the water, which is quickly dissipated away, a line in the sand, which stays for some time longer, and a line etched in a rock, which obviously stays for quite some time. And so at every moment we are getting so many impressions coming into our consciousness, into our mind, and most of these will just get washed out very quickly, and some will stay longer and some will stay with us for a very long time. And often those impressions that stay embedded in the consciousness for a very long time, they really shape how we view and interact with the world. So often when two people come together, either in a relationship, a friendship, or some kind of meeting, very often we want the other person to see and or at the very least understand how I am seeing the world. But this is somewhat of an impossible thing, because two people are coming together and they have had different experiences up until that point, and so these different experiences actually shape how the individual perceives the world. So because they have different experiences, obviously even if they're looking at the same object, same subject, they're going to view that in a somewhat different way because they have had different experiences. And I think this is a very helpful thing to understand, that people are always going to have some varying opinions on some level, or various interpretations. And so often when we want to control a situation, we think the person should surrender to how I see things. But often this just leads to conflict. Not to say that there's not some universal principles, particularly in spirituality, which are there prominent in most paths. And so I think another aspect to keep in mind is at this time of the lockdown, there's a lot of fear arising, a lot of uncertainty. A lot of people are really starting to question what's going on. A lot of information is being released about some of the people in high positions of power in this world, and how their intent is actually quite demonic, and how they really do not have the best intention for the general mass of people. And so some people may dismiss this as a conspiracy theory, and I'm not saying that we should necessarily buy into everything that we listen to on the internet, whether that's released from the so-called conspiracy theorists or the mainstream media. We should always exercise some discernment and try to exercise our intelligence as much as possible. And one thing that I know for certain in my own experience in this time is I don't know what's going on, really. And that's truth. I think sometimes we can try to cling on to certain things that we want to, or try to believe that are true, because it gives some false sense of being in control, or feeling like we know what's going on, when we really, if we're perhaps honest, realizing maybe we don't know exactly what's going on. And it takes a certain amount of humility to admit that we haven't always got things right. And I think one thing that's being presented to humanity at this time is a real valuable opportunity that we can really take a look at how we're living as a species, how we're impacting on the planet, but also in connection to our own individual existence, because it is directly our own individual existence which feeds the mass consciousness and gives rise to how the collective humanity is actually living as a society in general. So it's quite easy to point the finger that it's just maybe a few elite at the top of the chain who are pulling all the strings, and I'm not saying there's not a certain aspect of truth in that. However, I think there's also an aspect that it's our own individual existence and how we're living our lives, how through our consumer purchases, how we direct our own energy. This also sustains and feeds these people at the top of the food chain and keeps empowering them. So I would perhaps suggest that it can be very valuable through a certain stage of awakening to become aware of the, for lack of a better term, conspiracy theorists, and I should probably find some better term because it kind of sounds like they're very untrue. So I think it can be helpful to acknowledge that yes, there is some pretty crazy stuff going on in the world, and rather than just getting kind of stuck on the vibratory state of it's all their fault, one, because that's not particularly empowering, it can lead to a kind of sense of hopelessness and depression, and I'm not sure if that's necessarily the level of consciousness where a real solution can be found. Just for example, there's quite a different energetic state to an anti-war protest. One's anti-war, and the other is, a peace rally or a peace demonstration. And so one is coming from the vibratory state of fear and hate towards the other, and another one is promoting peace. And like Mahatma Gandhi said, we really want to be the change that we want to see in the world. So that starts at home. And many people are struggling with depression. It's driving them crazy actually being stuck at the house at this time, because maybe this is the first time they've been alone, or it's the first time that they've really had to be alone with themselves, had to be alone with what they're feeling, because so often we are living in a life of distraction. Maybe we're stuck in a job we dislike, we come home from work, maybe have some beer, or watch some TV, be absorbed in the movies or social media, and that keeps our mind in a state of distraction, and we don't have to actually deal with the fact that we're actually quite unhappy and even miserable inside, and are not satisfied with our own life. And I think during this time of lockdown, a lot of those feelings are actually coming to the surface, and it's making people really quite uncomfortable. So I think this can be a valuable time to really look inwardly and reflect upon our shadow sides, and really use this time valuably to make an effort to raise to a higher state of consciousness. And that starts at home. It starts individually, and as the more we can raise our vibration individually, the more the collective will begin to change, rather than just pointing the finger thinking it should happen externally and kind of waiting for it to happen outside. We can make a change at home first, and that will lead to our own happiness and contentment a lot sooner as well. So humility is a word that I'm using a lot here. So I want to tell a few pastimes today, and these pastimes you can kind of think of them like Zen koans, and they're there to elicit thinking of the conditioned mind and try to allow a deeper form of communication to be revealed to our own consciousness. And this reminds me of an old Zen tale of there's a new student, and he comes along to the master, and the master asks him if he wants tea. And so he gives the student a cup, and the Zen master is pouring the tea into the cup, and he's pouring, and it's overflowing, and then the student goes, "What are you doing? Can't you see it's overflowing?" And then the Zen master says, "Well, in the same way, if you're coming here with a full mind, a strong sense of self, a strong ego, a strong adherence to your own intelligence, thinking that you can know, thinking that you can understand, where is the room for true wisdom to arise?" So one of the fundamental principles in spiritual life, to advance, we always need to cultivate a mood of humility, and this is not an easy thing. So it reminds me of another tale from Saint Francis from about the 11th or 13th century, I believe. And one day he was walking through the mountains with a younger disciple named Friar Leo, and they were walking along, and And then Friar Leo, he asks, "Oh, please tell me, what is the greatest blessing?" And then Saint Francis, he said, if you can speak very sweet, charismatic words and make even a non-believer believe, then this is not the highest blessing. And they carried on walking. And then after some time, Leo said, "Oh, please tell me, what is the highest blessing?" And then Saint Francis turned around and said, "Oh, my dear brother Leo, if you can know all of the arts, all of the sciences, know all the movements of the planets, and speak all languages of the plants, the animals, the insects, and read minds, then this is not the highest blessing." And they carried on walking. And then this was building more and more in young Leo. And he said, "Oh, please, 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 just tell me, what is the highest blessing?" And then Saint Francis, he turned to young Leo and said, "Oh, my dear brother Leo, if when we get to the monastery, after we've been walking all day and all night, and we say, 'Oh, we are brothers from very, very far away, and we have come to take shelter here. Please let us in. We are very cold. We are very hungry.' And then the monks there, they open up the door and they say, 'Hey, you are cheaters. You are liars. You are pretenders.' And then shut the door and they don't let us in. And then we sit down on the steps, cold and shivering and very hungry. And then after some hours, they again open the door and like, 'Hey, you're still here?' And they grab a stick and they throw us down in the snow and they begin to beat us. And while they're beating us, they're saying, 'Oh, you are rogues, you are thieves, you are trying to pretend that you are sadhus, that you are saints, but really we know your true character. You are liars.' And then while they're beating us, we begin to think, yes, it's true. They are right. I am a pretender and I deserve this. Then this is the greatest blessing." So I'm not necessarily suggesting that St. Francis is saying that means to spiritual advancement is getting a good beating. I think what this story is trying to convey is the mood of humility. And one of the greatest gifts in spiritual life is getting over the identification with our own ego, with the own commentary of the mind, because perhaps you may notice that the mind is always translating experience, and however the mind translates experience, we tend to believe it. We think there's truth in it. I'm not saying it is true, I'm not saying it's not true, but what I am suggesting is the large percentage of the time, whatever is that mental translation of what's happening out there, or even what's happening in here, then we tend to believe that translation. And this gives rise to a lot of strife in the world and in our own life. So a mood of humility, like an empty vessel, then this is the first step to spiritual awakening and spiritual understanding, rather than clinging on to our own ideals, because so often in spiritual life, or even life in general, we're looking for something to verify that agenda that we already have. So we gravitate towards a particular path, a particular teaching, a particular way of moving through the world to move in accordance with the desire that we already have dormant inside. So just think about that for a moment while I take a sip of tea. And next I want to touch on this word Dharma. So Dharma means there's a couple of three different contexts I want to kind of approach it from today. And so the first one is in any elemental structure, a particular combination of nature, there's a particular nature within any substance. So in this context, Dharma means an object's particular swabhava, its particular nature. To give an example, the Dharma of water is liquidity, fluidity, softness. The Dharma of sugar is to be sweet. The Dharma of fire is to emit light and warmth. The Dharma of salt is to be salty. And if these particular objects don't have their respective characteristics, then they're something else. Now, what can take place is what's called nisarga. An object can take on an acquired nature. Again, coming back to the water example, if you put water in a tray and you put it in the refrigerator and the freezer, it becomes ice and it becomes very, very hard. So this is not it in its natural state, it's an acquired state. So also, the majority of humanity is actually living in an acquired state of being. Our hearts, our true nature has become very hard, and when our hearts become hard, they become closed off from one another and from other living entities, and we start to live a self-serving existence, to the detriment of those people around us, and also to the detriment of the planet that we're all inhabiting and other species upon the planet and the environment. So it's really the solution to all problems to come back to our and live in accordance from our original state. So there's two kinds of Dharma, nimitic Dharma, temporary Dharma, and then eternal Dharma. So a temporary function and an eternal function. So you might say the temporary function of the water is to put it in the refrigerator into ice cubes so I can enjoy ice in my drink. But that is temporary function, and when the conditions are favorable and it return back to its natural state, it'll move back to soft liquid water. And so often the conception in relation to the human, I mean, it's another discussion, what is human? Let's look at that very briefly for a moment. 4 propensities have been identified in all moving and non-moving living entities. And they are 1, eating, taking in some sustenance for the survival of the body, mating, some kind of procreation for survival of the species, sleeping, and then defending. Defending, I'm not necessarily meaning like a combat, but rather creating a safe environment for the longevity of that individual. So eating, mating, sleeping, and defending. These are all animal propensities. And if we look, most humans are actually living a glorified these 4 propensities in a glorified way. Eating too much, or thinking about food so much. Out of all the senses in the body, the tongue is the hardest to control, even harder than the sexual desire, because the sexual desire only manifests from about teenager, and then it dwindles later in life, at least physically. But from the moment you're born till the moment you die, you spend so much time thinking about satisfying the tongue. So this tongue is a very hard one to control and absorbs a lot of energy from the consciousness. So eating, mating, sleeping, and defending, they're all present there in all animal species. And so what is human? What is human consciousness? Because we, in the human vehicle, we have a particular higher intellectual faculty that can become available. And so it'd be our great fortune to awaken this higher intellectual faculty as much as possible. So the Dharma in relation to your position you are in now in the world. So there's a temporary Dharma related to your particular body that you have. And you have some particular duties in accordance with that body in relation to your family, your position in the world, any dependence, a job, any circumstance like this. There is some form of duty that is there, that if you perform that duty well, without attachment to the fruits, it will lead to your own upliftment and to the upliftment of those around you. So in the Vedic paradigm, there's what's called Purusharthas, 4 pillars of human life. And so they are Dharma, doing your duties to the best of your ability without attachment to the fruits, and then Dharma, Artha, material prosperity. Dharma, Artha, and then Karma. Not karma with an R, but karma, K-A-M-A. So if you do your duties well, then some prosperity comes from that, and you can start to enjoy the fruits of those. And then once you get freed up from enjoying the fruits, because you realize even the temporary fruits, they are fleeting and they still don't satisfy the longing of the soul, then you come to the 4th one, moksha. You want liberation. You want to get out of this cycle of birth and death, changing bodies all the time, but still never really satisfying the longing that's there deep in the heart. And so that then moves us towards, well, and think about this deeply, and even after this talk, contemplate this in a contemplative, analytical meditation, throughout your day. What is the Dharma of the soul? Because in meditation, we can, just like in the beginning, with our awareness, we move through the body and we became aware of the body. So we were aware of the different parts of the body. And then we were aware of the breath. And then you can take that further, going introspectively in, and you can observe the mind and the thoughts in the mind, and you can watch the mind. The thoughts in the mind have a particular gravitational pull, a magnetic effect, and they often move the awareness in, and we identify with it. But through practice, through meditation, we can start to take a step back and we just watch the mind. And the thoughts in the mind are like clouds just moving through, and we're watching them. And then we can start to exercise whether we want to actually engage with these thoughts or not, rather than just kind of following them like a donkey following a carrot. And only at that point, when we really start to have some freedom about whether we want to engage with those thoughts or not, only at that point does free will actually start to manifest in the human. So we can step back, we can watch the thoughts in the mind. So we're not this body, we're aware of the body. We're not the mind, we're not the thoughts in the mind, we're aware of them. So then, who are we really? What are we really? Because often we're caught up in the mental narrative going on in the head, and we keep reinvesting in that, and it seems very real, and the more energy we invest into it, the more it seems to solidify into a reality. But this is the content of our consciousness. It's not actually who we are. We're conscious, but we're identifying with the content of our consciousness. So that which is consciousness is an inherent property within the soul, within the spirit, whatever name you want to give that. So here's a very valuable question. What is the Dharma of the soul? Because every object has its own swabhav, its own inherent nature. Now, the temporary body you have has its temporary nature in accordance to the temporary world. But we are soul, and bodies are coming and going, coming and going. Even this body, it is growing, it is decaying. Our awareness is a steady continuum throughout all the change of the body. And so the Dharma in relation to the body, that's a temporary Dharma. It's not our eternal Dharma. Our eternal Dharma is related to the soul. So what is the Dharma of the soul? This is the most valuable question. And your spiritual life will accelerate to the next level. Many wonderful things will open when we start to move towards this kind of unfolding. And so one of the aspects of the eternal Dharma of the soul is service. And perhaps you're saying, well, I don't like to serve. Maybe not. But how much are you actually engaged in service? And let's take a look at that for a moment. There may be one man, one woman, and they have a family, and maybe one parent stays at home and the other goes to work. And through that work, they are acquiring some money and bringing that back home and supporting the family. So they are serving the family. Maybe the wife is staying at home and she's serving the children. The mother is serving the children. The man at work, he's serving the manager. The manager is serving the regional manager. The regional manager is serving the boss. The boss is serving the government by paying tax. We can never actually get away from this service. And even a single woman all alone, she wants to get one cat, and she wants to serve the cat. It's because it's the natural propensity of the soul to want to engage and serve with other souls, with other living entities. So we cannot get away from this. And when our consciousness is absorbed in the temporary body, the temporary mind, and the commentary in the mind, then we want to serve our body, our senses. It's a very self-orientated kind of service. And the more we begin to awaken, the more our consciousness begins to expand, the more we begin to realize that we are actually like a small cog in a very big machine. And if you are a small part of a large machine, then everything has its function, and the small should serve the whole totality, because the soul actually longs to be in loving relationship with reality. So, and you will see the great masters of the past, when they transcend their own self-centered, when your own idea about yourself no longer becomes the forefront of your own experience, the more you'll just want to serve. And that doesn't mean that we all need to open hospitals or become sadhu renunciants in the cave. Service can take on its own individual flavor with every individual, and that's what makes spirituality very unique and very special. But we cannot escape this mood of service. And this is a very wonderful thing, because the more we begin to serve, the more we become empowered, the more satisfied we become, and the more faith that starts to manifest within us. And the more we can really start to have that experience in our own life that there is a higher power. We want to serve that higher power. We can be in relationship with that absolute reality, with that absolute consciousness, and really exchange in a loving exchange with absolute reality. And this is really what the soul is longing for. And this is an ongoing process of purification, and I'm just a beginner on this process. I'm not trying to talk from a place and I'm a great awakened master, because the truth is I'm not, and I get things wrong, and I'm still get things wrong, and this is a great unfolding and learning process. And I want to tell one more pastime. This is from the Vedic histories. There was one personality called Acharya, I believe, and he was employed by the Devas that to engage with in battle with the Asuras, with the beings of demonic mentality. And this war went on for a long time, but he was victorious. And then after that, he said, "Oh, I want to rest and just do bhajan. I want to do deep absorption in the absolute consciousness." So he went to one solitary place, and he was sitting down in his samadhi, in his trance, absorbed in connection with the absolute reality. And then the demons, they were holding a grudge, and so they wanted to take revenge. So while he was in his samadhi, they all came, surrounded him with their weapons, and they were about to strike him with their weapons. And they went like this, but then they just could not actually strike him with any of their weapons. And then like, oh, this is strange, what's going on? So they went to their guru, and his name was Shuka Acharya. And then Shuka Acharya said, "Oh yes, you must try to break his trance and speak atheistic thoughts to him, and try to say that there is no God, there's no higher power, don't believe in this plane of love or anything like this." And as long as they could not break his trance, then they were able to not strike him with their weapons. And there's another history. There was one poor Brahmin man, and his name was Arjun Mishra. And he had a wife, and they were very, very poor, but they were very sincere devotees. And he lived by begging, and he was also writing one commentary on the Bhagavad Gita. So every morning after he had done his rituals and his meditation, for a couple of hours he would write commentary on the Gita. And it got to a certain verse where it says in the Gita, Krishna says, whatever the surrendered bhakti yogi, the devotee, has, I preserve it, and I myself will give what they need. And Arjun Mishra was thinking, sometimes I go out begging and I don't get any food, and my wife and I, we go hungry, and I'm not sure if this verse is true. I think it's interpolation, and someone has added this afterwards. So he struck 3 lines through this verse, and then he went out for the day and was doing his begging, and no matter where he went, no one would give him food that day. And then his wife got a knock on the door, and she just ignored it because she only had a torn piece of cloth, and she felt not appropriate to answer the door. And but this person was insistent and said, "Oh, Mataji, I have the food from Panditji." And so she opened the door, and she said that she was very ashamed, and she was looking down because of her dirty cloth. And then the young boy who was at the door, he said, "Oh, I have the food and supplies sent from your husband. Sorry I took some time, but here they are." And then the voice was very sweet, and she looked up, and she was captivated by the charming beauty of this young boy. And so she said, "Oh, you can take the prasadam to the kitchen through here, and their food." And then she looked upon his chest, and there was three strikes upon him, and she said, "Oh, my sweet young boy, who would be so cruel-hearted to do these things to you?" And then he said, "Oh, this was actually your husband." And then she said, "What? Just wait till he gets home. I will severely reprimand him." And then with all that abundance of food, she said to him, "Oh, please take a seat, and I will prepare some food, make a nice meal, and then you can take." And so he said, "Okay." And then she went into the kitchen, and she was cooking. And then her husband came home during this time, and then her husband walked through the door and smelt the cooking and thought, "How is she cooking? I never sent any food back today." And then the wife said, "Oh, you sent some very nice supplies today. And then the husband said, no, I definitely sent no supplies. And then she said, yes, you sent it with that young boy, and hey, why did you strike him? And then that Arjun Mishra said, no, I sent no young boy. And he thought about it, and he was like, oh, my dear wife, you are so fortunate. Gopinath, the original personality himself, has actually come and personally given this food to us. And then he went out the back. They both went out the back to the courtyard, and that young boy was gone, and the door was locked from the inside. And then he went to his study room, and that copy of the Gita, where he had marked the verse with the 3 lines, the 3 lines were gone. So the more we can surrender to the Supreme Consciousness in a mood of service, the more we will be held, the more we will be nourished, the more everything that we need, not everything necessarily that we want, but everything that we need will be provided to us. And so this is an ongoing process of surrender. And so this is a very wonderful thing. And we're all on this journey together. And the more we can surrender into that, the more our lives will become quite magical. So I hope this little discussion was of some use to you. I very much wish you blessings on your journey forward, and cultivate surrender, cultivate a search for truth, and always stay connected to a place of humility. And I hope we can meet again. Thank you very much. Namaste. Radhe Radhe.